Curmudgeon Cellar. I'm the Curmudgeon. Crusty old fart, I think that says. Yeah, that's me. I'm actually recording this on Talk Like a Pirate Day, so arr, there you go. I wonder how hard, well, I've yet to see anybody come up with a good pirate game, a really good seminal pirate game. It's a shame. Pirates ought to be more fun. Of course, there's Black Sails, which is a tremendous English product that's all about sailing ships and what have you. It could be about pirates as well. Anyway, all right, let's start, shall we? Best outro music ever. Yeah, well, it's not like we came up with it, is it, though? But it was fun. Before I discovered D&D via Holmes Basic Edition in 1980 as a tween, being a Trekkie dork was my main hobby. You have every right to be quite proud of what you TSR guys made. Seems obvious, I guess, now that most people just don't realize how revolutionary the whole thing was and how hard it was to push that barrel up the hill. People have never known anything but word processors, simple printing options, Kickstart, even Kickstart have no idea how hard it was to achieve. Well, thanks. I'm not going to take all the, I'm only going to get a tiny bit of credit for it. Or I'm only going to take a tiny bit of credit for it. There's others that are willing to take much more that I don't care. Let them, whether it's them and their conscience that has to live with it. Yeah, well, we were a product of our time. Yeah, hot wax, X-Acto knives, blue lines for copy, and much more primitive printing methods, but we did what we did with what we had, and it was fun. It was fun. Regarding power creep and character building, I remember when I got involved in the Wednesday night organized play being strongly encouraged to select certain feats and skills for a given character, as in, everybody knows a rogue always takes feat X at level 3 because that unlocks feat Y at level 6. Generally, an exercise in min-max builds rather than actual character creation. 3.5 and Pathfinder continue to be my least favorite additions. Yeah, that it began there. I'm certain that it began there. And there's another comment on a little further along tonight that lends to this, and that is that I guess a lot of people don't mind cheating themselves or even see that as cheating. Everybody wants to step out of the pages of a comic book instead of getting their start in the college newspaper. And it's nothing to denigrate college newspapers. I was involved with mine at Blackhawk College, but there's an enormous gap. Well, it's just something that happened that I think sucks, and we're left to deal with it, and we'll talk more about it here in a little while. TSR, well, the Blooms, seem to have shafted so many people. It's too bad. And in reply to that, by someone else, comment to that, sure did, and we're still paying. Yeah, the Blooms mainly shafted themselves, when you get right down to it, I'm certain that when it all fell apart, they didn't get anywhere near what their share could have been. They've got no one to blame but themselves for poor character judgment in some of the hires they did, and certainly no one to blame but themselves for some of the poor, just piss poor decisions they made themselves. Is what it is, and it was, and we still paying for it. Yep, we are. I am not convinced that the latest version of D&D is purely a result of Hasbro catering to exactly what customers want. That's not how economics works. I mean, in capitalism, companies don't only cater to customer demand. Businesses also create a demand in customers. That's why the advertising industry is a trillion-dollar business. Okay, point taken. Companies can create a demand for more old-school style gaming, and small businesses are doing so, of course. And customers can influence the market in other ways. That is, customers can create YouTube videos that inspire people to buy more old-school style products and inspire people to sign petitions and write email, etc. to Hasbro, asking for more old-school style products. Yeah, you're right. Any company that's doing well is going to find new ways to do either continue doing well or do better. And so I can see from Hasbro's point of view what an enormous big advertising for fantasy tabletop role-playing that those geeks, they're not worthy of being geeks. Some of those dropouts from community theater playing live online, all right, well, I don't, and many others don't think that they were very good at what they were doing. Actually, they were very good at something else they were doing, and that was showing people how to play in an overly dramatized, phony voices, the whole over the top. They were all emoting. And that wasn't a tremendous marketing tool, because thousands of people go, well, hell, I can do that. And they might even have thought they could do it better if they really thought that the emoting was part of it. But they created a new crop of players by opening the doors and showing, hey, it's really not that hard. See, this is how they do it. I didn't really see that until not too long ago. I want to talk more about, I want to talk about the Time magazine issue, but I'll have to try to remember it when I get done here, or else I'll lose my train of thought. And God knows that train gets away often enough and easily enough. You're right. The companies can create the demand by how they advertise, what type of play these live action players present. And they can also be influenced if enough people do emails and stuff. And I don't know how many enough is, but I have a good imagination, and I imagine that there's not enough people really care enough to send that many emails. And yeah, there's us YouTube people that I'm not selling anything except fun and perhaps a different way to do it. I won't even claim that it's a better way to do it, though I think it is. I don't make that claim. Okay. Pardon me. Tonsil oil needed. What? What's that? Oh, sorry. Got a message from the mothership. On the cover of Time magazine in a good way. I laughed out loud. Picture you and Gary in Hunter Biden style mugshots. Well, there was a time, there were a couple of times when things were hairy. But yeah. Okay, let's talk about that Time magazine. For the most part, I found it to be very fair, even-handed. I can't say that they got anything wrong, but there are nuances that apparently weren't shared when they were doing their research or whatever. But it was a damn fine recognition by a smart publishing company to say, hey, look what's already out here. I'm sure they'll sell a lot of copies. I'm sure every D&D geek will get one at $14 a pop. But I bought, it's the first time ever, I bought two of something. One to read and one to keep. I'm going to take the cover off the reader and frame it next to the stamps. Wow. I understand the problem with power creep in a 5e game. My group ended up banning multiclassing, and that's taken care of overpowered combinations. If someone wanted to play in the style of a fighter mage, there are subclasses for that. No more taking one level in a front-loaded class just to abandon it. Good point, and a good decision, I would think, from your groups and running your group's point of view. That's a pretty good decision. Just don't have them. Now, that's not like, for instance, the classic D&D Bard, where you have to earn your way up twice just to become a novice and, carve loot picks. Because as a Bard, you still have those abilities. You don't have to give them up. You just don't advance any, in that none of your experience earned at the point you become a druid goes toward those two anymore. Which is really a blessing if you think about it, because a lot of people play that if you're running two classes, then your levels are, in that very isolated instance, your levels should go up at half the rate. Each of the half the points should go into each level. That would sure slow down some of that crap. You want to play multi-character? Fine. What, basically, from what it looks to me, 3 classes? Okay, fine. And you will proceed at 1/3 the speed you thought you did, because everything you do will be distributed over those 3 classes. Just an idea. Carrion crawlers. Whose idea was it to make those measly 3 hit dice critters so damn deadly? It's bad enough they have 8 tentacles to attack you with, but, as written in the Monster Manual, for each one that successfully hits, you have to make a save against paralyzation that has no time limit. And I thought ghouls were bad. Well, you got to understand where the carrion crawlers came from. The fevered mind of Gary. Gary's Greyhawk was an enormous dungeon complex of many different levels inhabited by many different things. The Ark level would be over here, and the Goblin level would be over there. And when Rob or somebody was going through, we need a party, where you going? We're going to the Goblin level. Okay. Now, the Goblin level might have been cleaned out at one point in time, and something else might have lived there, but it's still referred to as the Goblin level. And there comes a time in every DM's career when you got to figure out, what the hell do you do with all that dead shit? So Gary came up with the gelatinous cube and the purple worm and the carrion crawlers as his hideous and ghastly janitorial system. The cube just envelops things and dissolves them, but it pushes down the corridor full of dead goblins and gladly swallows them up. And lo and behold, a year later in game time, the goblin level is now filled with kobolds. But be that as may, without getting into the intricacies of how Greyhawk worked, he had these things because they needed to clean up the dungeon. Otherwise, imagine the stink. And doesn't nature always provide creatures that convert dead things into nutrients? All right, so the cube just inches its way. It's not very fast or anything, and it serves as a block wherever it is. But what it's been doing is it's been cleaning up behind it. Now, the D&D movie aside, you can't slide through one, but what a neat effect that was. The purple worm was also a denizen of the very lowest, rankest, most human foul levels. Also served a purpose in that they cleaned up. They would eat anything. Now the carrion crawlers, same purpose, only got 3 hit dice, but they've got those tentacles with the paralysis. Well, that's so that if they come across something that's still sort of alive, they can immobilize it and then eat it. And if it's something really big, well, they can sink 3 or 4 tentacles into it. That's what Gary's logic was. No, not me. I didn't do it. Not me. It's not my fault. I know someone who runs a D&D group basically without monsters having hit points in the traditional sense. Instead of assigning HPs, he just assigns how many hits the monster will take before it dies. It isn't something I would prefer in my game, but I can understand the simplicity of his idea. Apparently it's worked well for him, as he has run his game that way for decades now. What would you consider the most different from standard rules house rule that you use in your game? Well, I like this guy's idea. As long as you keep with, how easy is it to hit something that has a very good armor class with a puny dagger? As long as you keep that relative scale, then I like the idea. I mean, look how hard it is to hit anything. You got to roll like a 19 or 20 to hit a really high class, high armor class creature with, a dagger. So, yeah, I said that sounds like it makes it go pretty quick. Makes it go pretty quick. No rolling for damage. Just, okay, you hit it. Great. 7 hits later, topples over. Now, if you'd played it with dice and damage and that, it might have taken 7 more rounds. But, yeah, it's pretty cool. I'd be interested to know how he runs the hit points on the player characters. What would I consider the most different from standard rules house rule that you use in your game? The way I treat clerics. I do clerics, as I've explained many times, entirely different. They don't say spells. They don't do conjures. Now, I say that in full meaning of full understanding that we are dealing with most of the people playing are dealing with one of the major religious forms, or were raised in it, or at least exposed to it, whether it was Judaism or Christianity or Muslim or there's a couple others that I would consider big enough in the number of people that follow them and profess belief in them. They don't. I just don't see the need to play. I don't believe that we're as comfortable. Rabbis, imams, and cardinals don't perform rituals that involve. They conduct ritual services, but when it's time to bless the wafer, we'll take that as from the Christian side. When it's time to bless the wafer, they don't get 2 newt's ears, the leg of a bat, and henbane gathered in the midnight sun and burn it on the altar to consecrate. So most of us that follow or were raised in one of those main religious forms don't have any background in anything like that, and I didn't see any reason to. So I just said, oh, come on. It's like taking a test. You do enough stuff to go from 4th level cleric to 5th level cleric, well then part of that is knowing all those prayers. And when you get there, you can use any of those prayers that you want to, but only so many prayers a day, because you only have so much sanctity or mojo or whatever. There has to be a limit, but it makes a cleric such an enormously differently capable player. And of course, along with my cleric changes is the way I treat cures, cure potions, Red Bulls. If you're going to change the clerics, you got to deal with healing. Now, you can still make potions for other types of medicines or, whatever. And if you start mixing potions, I don't have a problem with there being some sort of danger to mixing potions. But if all you're doing is taking Red Bulls in the middle of a grueling fight or something like that, don't need to bother with it. That's the biggest difference in my games. Would you give an overview of the way that you and your players rolled dice at Curmudgeon? Did you have the dragon dice or were you using D6s? When we started playing, I had percentile dice. And within a week or two of getting everything up and going, because it took me a while to get it all off the ground the first time, I also had the alternative combat system. How we rolled dice, I built 2 dice boxes out of wooden cigar boxes, baffles, 3 or 4 baffles in each one. Put it in the slot at the top, it rolls out the bottom. I did that for a number of reasons. Number one, none of the people in my group had seen anything that wasn't a D6. Because virtually all board games and miniatures rules use D6s, because you could always go steal them out of the Yahtzee game. So we used percentiles right off the bat. I made the dice box because D4s. You got to bounce a D4 to get a fair roll. They slide way too easy. We only had 1 set of dice, mine. So the dice box and the dice went out in the center of the table, and whoever needed took the one they needed, the box, and they rolled it where it came out onto the table. And everybody got to see it. Now that quickly became pretty boring. Yeah, okay, what'd you get? At first we're all peering down. Well, what's going to happen? So we used a dice box. Mainly it was just to facilitate using things that just didn't feel normal. A pair of six-siders, shooting craps, playing Monopoly, whatever. But, do that with a couple of D4s and you end up with dents in your hand. I never really played the only D6. If you want to know how to do percentiles with a D6, get a copy or get access to a copy of a board game called Fight in the Skies or Dawn Patrol, same game. They decided they had to change the name at some point. Same game. And you'll find a table in there using 3D6s, 2 of one color and 1 of another, as I recall. I haven't played in a little while. But I do know that many, many years ago, I took the table and I checked it out. And it is an astonishingly accurate way of generating percentiles in increments of 5. All right, it's astonishingly accurate. My car came up with it when he invented the game while he was still in high school. And it's very, very good way to roll percentages when all you have is D6s. Now, if you have a friend that has the game, ask him if you can copy that one page. I never, ever suggest that people copy any of the game. I believe at one time in the past, with Mike's blessing, I published it in an early Dragon, or it might have been a late Strategic Review, probably an early Dragon. It's astonishingly accurate. It's the best way I know. As to rolling D8s and D12s and all that, I'm glad I never had to learn, because I began with one of the very first poly sets. Can you lay out the basic method for using D6s for D20, etc.? Nope. I bet you can find a chart. The way the Fight in the Skies chart works, okay, you've got a 35% chance, you roll the dice. If any of the numbers that come up in the 35% column come up, you got it. If none of them do, you didn't. Easy peasy. Okay. This is now we're going to talk about elves. Got a lot to get onto in elves here, so let me read this real quick. Are post-Tolkien elves inevitable in fantasy TTRPGs? I don't allow. Yeah, I've heard said that you don't allow elf PCs in your games, and I don't. In games where elf PCs are accepted, if elves, which spelling, are fey, therefore part of a chaotic twilight species more alike unto goblins than humans, how can a player stick to the characterization and be a reliable part of the team? I'll go on before I say what a wonderful question that is. Some form of random whimsy mechanic would be required to inform the player's interactions, or just a pretty chaotic mind in charge. Excellent. Excellent. When we made the alignment chart, the big square, where are you on the alignment chart? Elves were not, they were put in chaotic neutral, or possibly even chaotic evil at the very, very beginning. Chaotic. In the very beginning, chaotic meant that you couldn't be expected to behave the same way in the same circumstance again and again. One day you might be grumpy, and the next day you may want to spear somebody. Though generally elves were good with pixies and the fairies. And that's the way I felt elves ought to be. The European elves, particularly the northern European elves, are mischievous and tricksters. And you put out a bowl of milk for the elves at night so they didn't bother you and things like that. Those I liked. We got Tolkien. Gary and I had this conversation. He ruefully accepted the fact that nobody was ever going to see elves in the way that they were originally in the fairy tales. Even in Grimm had elf corollaries that were downright wicked. So we knew that we were going to be stuck with Tolkien's elves. They ride around on fancy moose. Just like we're stuck with Tolkien's dwarves. Now, having said the word stuck twice, I don't mind in the case of the dwarves. Okay, I'm a dwarvophile or whatever. I don't mind at all. I do have a little trouble with elves having so much extra going for them. I don't like them as a PC. Nope. And not too many people have played dwarves in any of my games. Yeah, there would have to be some sort of random whimsy mechanic. Good idea. How? I do not denigrate the value of the idea, but how do you do that? DM rolls, no, on his whimsy table that he has. No, too bad there, leg of lamb. You decide not to. So if they're going to be chaotic, they can't be regimented. Look at those regiments of fine elvish bowmen in the Tolkien movies. They're not what we would consider, had considered, hundreds of elves marching in unison is not chaotic behavior. Or maybe it is if they decide, nah, today's well day, and we don't feel like fighting on well day. That might throw a spanner in the works. Now players can be randomly whimsical all by themselves, as every DM knows, and bang, the scenario takes a completely unpredictable turn. That's part of why we play. Yeah, you can be randomly whimsical on your own. Decide, screw it, I'm going to do that. Nobody's there to stop you. Nobody's there to tell you no. That would be more of a chaotic behavior. But, as I have learned the hard way over the years that I've run games at cons, never, ever give a pre-gen an alignment. Because then people think they're compelled to take it to the nth degree. What are you going to do with elves that don't act like traditional elves pre-Tolkien? I still won't let them be a character. And that silliness at one point in there where your character was your race, what was up with that? Or your race was your character. I never did figure out that one. Class, I'm not saying race, class. Your race was your class. Hobbits were a class? I don't know. It seemed silly to me at the time. I haven't seen anything to change my mind. But we don't do it anymore. Well, maybe some people do. But then again, if you don't want to, don't. But to avoid a constant outbreak of chaotic insanity, I suggest, in most games, elf PCs must be post-Tolkien, Tolkien-esque. That is, noble, human-like, serious, knightly, near immortals, rather than the elves of European mythology. Yeah, I guess that's why they're inevitable. However, playing one of my games sometime, and you might run into some Northwestern European elves. We'll see if you recognize them. Do you have any other analogs for elves, or ways that players can play elves with a point of difference to other kinships? That is, not as chaotic as mythological elves, or as highly evolved, for want of a better term, as Tolkien elves. Well, it seems to me that an awful lot of DMs don't enforce stats. Unless you're in one of those campaigns where you believed everybody that said they all rolled 15s and better for their stats. Okay, if you believe that without watching it, then I guess we all get what we deserve, don't we? I would place limitations. I have done that. I've told somebody, wait a minute, you're playing Boris? Boris is only slightly smarter than a bush. I don't think you'd have thought of that. Boris wouldn't have thought of that. And Boris has got to sit there and be quiet. Now, what happens? Somebody else says, well, I thought of it. Okay. But I think it's fun sometimes to remind the players of the limitations that their characters might have. Bring them down to earth a little bit. And yeah, that used to happen a lot. I mean, I can remember in several testing sessions where we were testing a different game at the time at TSR, but where we had strictly limited exposure to anything outside. We were playing MA. All right, and we were the ignorant tribesmen who finally found a way out of the ignorant tribesman nomad level to explore the rest of the ship. And Gary would sit there, no, you didn't think of that. No, you didn't think of that. No, you couldn't think of that. Because it was out of character. It was metagaming. We were playing, basically, ignorant savages, illiterate ignorant savages. And so we had to come up with analogs that ignorant, illiterate savages would come up with to try and understand. I've told the story the anecdote many times of the fact that we spent 3 nights until we figured out that the neatly stacked pile of lumber in the corner was a staircase that led up to a push the button and a door opened. But it made us play within the limitations of our character. And hey, sometimes you can take the limitations of your characters and have fun with them. If you got a non-remarkable wisdom, then be the guy in the party that does crazy shit and succeeds. So you're not wise. Well, no, he's not very wise. Of course he's going to try that. If you're one with the super intelligence, try to think your way around it. And if you got a DM that believes in it, he'll tell you, well, he'll let you do that. Play within, play as the stats. That's what I'll leave it on. Don't overlook the stats. Dodata Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.